Hello, everyone. Welcome to another segment of Black Op Radio. This is your host, Len Osanic. Today we have the privilege of being joined by author Barry Ernest. Hello, Barry.
Hi, Len. How are you?
Good. A pleasure to speak to you again. You've been on Black Op Radio before, but for those who haven't heard you, I thought it's a time we discuss your very good book again because it's being reprinted.
Yes, it was self-published for about 1 year. And the book caught on quite a bit, and I received some interest from a commercial publisher, Pelican Publishing Company, out of Gretna, Louisiana, and they elected to print it and publish it basically as is, with some editorial changes that were my fault, actually, some misspellings and errors of that nature. But as a whole, it is virtually the same as what it was self-published, with some updating research.
Right. Now, the book we're talking about is Girl on the Stairs, and it's background of your investigation and the story of Vicky Adams. Maybe for those not familiar, do you want to give us a brief background of your interest into this and the book, and then we'll get into some of the new things that have popped up?
Alrighty. In 1967, actually, I was a firm believer in the Warren Report, and a classmate of mine, when I was at college in a history seminar, approached me with some questions as to why I believed the Warren Report. And he raised some issues with me that I had been unfamiliar with at that point, and it caused me to start looking into this subject a lot more. The next thing I knew, I was in Dallas interviewing witnesses, and at the National Archives in Washington searching through the documents related to the case. What this turned out to be for me was a sort of a two-pronged journey. The first prong was my search for answers to who shot my president, and the second prong was my fascination with finding a witness who I felt was very important in this case. Her name was Victoria Elizabeth Adams, and she was a witness to the assassination. She was on the fourth floor of the depository at the time the shots were fired. And her claim to fame, so to speak, was the fact that immediately after the shots, she ran down the back staircase of the depository to get outside to see what was going on. And it happened to be at the time that Oswald was supposedly on those stairs as he made his escape from the 6th to the 2nd floor. So my question at that point, the Warren Commission had pretty much dismissed her as being erroneous with her timing, but for some reason that story caught my attention, and from that point on, in addition to looking for generally some facts on what happened that day, I became fascinated with trying to find this woman and determine the truthfulness of her story. So the book centers on that journey. It took me 35 years before I finally found Vicky Adams, and the book is, as I said, based on what I found along the way, the people that I interviewed, some of the details I uncovered, as well as my attempts to find Vicky Adams and determine whether her story was accurate or not.
Yeah, this is so interesting because I think a lot of people, if you try to look for tidbits of information, there's kind of an obfuscation that's gone on with the Warren Commission, that they change testimony, they leave a few things out. And so when you start searching, you think, well, where were these people, and who would have seen Lee Oswald, or who wouldn't, if he wasn't there and then someone was there to say there was nobody there? Where are these witnesses and who are they?
Exactly. That's what I found. If you don't go into the Warren Report very deep, you are convinced, you're swayed into believing that this was an open and shut case. It's only when you look behind the scenes, as I did, that you're shocked, at least I was, at what happened to a lot of these witnesses and a lot of the evidence in the crime. What I found was that Vicky Adams was simply one part of a pattern that was used by the government to discredit or dismiss witnesses that did not support their preconceived notion that Oswald did it, and he did it by himself. We have to remember that as early as January of '64, before the Warren Commission actually called its first witness, there was a draft of the Warren Report sent out to members of the commission, and in that draft, they labeled Oswald as the lone assassin. what kind of investigation are you going to get from that point on if you already have this preconceived conclusion that Oswald did it? The witnesses such as Vicky Adams, who at least had some credibility to the fact that Oswald may not have been on the 6th floor, were simply dismissed, overlooked. She was ignored. She wasn't allowed to participate in any of the time tests that were being conducted on regarding Oswald's escape. The witnesses who could have corroborated her story were not questioned at all about the timing of it. She basically was ignored, and her story was dismissed as being nothing more than a mistake on her part.
Right. And then we wonder how many other people who did offer testimony, were kind of sidetracked to say, well, they must be mistaken. I just heard that over and over again, and you start to wonder, I think the conspiracy here, and people like to belittle that word, but it is of the Warren Commission itself, about how you say they had a preconceived notion. And preconceived means this is a conspiracy of these guys to circumvent any kind of governmental real investigation by saying we're going to go along with what the FBI spoon feeds us because that's what Lyndon Johnson and J. Edgar Hoover want. And that's what the bosses want, and that's what we're going to deliver, a report that says that. And that was like from day one.
Well, I had Roger Craig, for instance, tell me that he noticed his testimony was altered from when he delivered it and when it was printed. You have Carolyn Walters, who saw two men on the 6th floor. She was ignored. You have Emmett Hudson, who was the groundskeeper. I talked with him. He was sort of swayed into saying that the shots came from behind the motorcade rather than behind him, which would have put those shots from the grassy knoll. You have Mrs. Higgins, who was a participant, a witness, so to speak, in the Tippit slaying, who was saying that she definitely heard those shots fired at Tippit at 1:06 p.m. that afternoon, which certainly would have excluded Oswald. She was ignored. There are all kinds of witnesses, and for some reason that's what I sort of gravitated to in my early research when I went to Dallas in '68. I was looking for the witnesses who were ignored or claimed that their testimony had been changed, or they were on the outskirts of the investigation, so to speak. They were the ones who didn't fit the pattern that the Warren Commission was obviously looking for. And those are the ones that I went to see if they were legitimate in what they were telling people. And I found that in most cases they were. They were just the average citizen who were attempting to tell the truth, but were now resigned to the fact that the words they used, what it was they said they saw, was just being ignored and not accepted. And that's the word that I use a lot when people ask me how were these witnesses in '68, and I think the word is they were resigned to the fact that they had attempted to do the right thing in telling the truth. And when they realized that it wasn't being accepted, then there was nothing else that they could do about it. And it was certainly the strategy that Vicky Adams used. She told me repeatedly that all she did was tell the truth, and the response that she got, the reaction that she got, was a clear indication to her that the government was trying to come up with this theory, this hypothesis of how it was done and why, and anything that was objectionable to them or anything that was disputing that theory was simply going to be ignored. And she resigned herself to the fact that is what was done in her case, and there wasn't anything more that she could do about it.
I actually wanted to say this, that not only do I really endorse this book, that I recommend anyone in the JFK research community get it. I enjoyed it. And I think that the fact that someone, as you mentioned in the beginning of your journey, you thought, well, I took everything at face value. I believe when, Walter Cronkite came on TV or the Warren Report, why would these guys lie to us? Your journey is that you started off from, not somebody on an extreme position, but just thought, I had assumed what was reported was the truth. And the further you dig, it really opens up this, I don't know, a black hole of information. You go to find all these different witnesses, and that's where the real story is the journey of the investigation. That I see that, I think on Amazon or somewhere there was a review, but someone had nicknamed the book "The Girl Who Disproved the Warren Report," because this search, really, you would find it strange that just an investigation of one witness, and there's several, we'll go into those as well, but in the case of Vicky Adams, it's very important that since her testimony has to be altered or changed or belittled, and said she doesn't know what she's talking about. If it's true what she says, Lee Oswald did not do this at all. And then you have to look at the big picture. So this one witness actually hinges a lot. And with your research, what you've backed up, that, you approved what she says and what other witnesses says, where she was, what she would have seen, what would have had to happen. This really disproves the Lee Oswald shot anyone that day. Well, I mean, I can't say about Tippett, but, it disproves that he wasn't where the Warren Commission said he was, and he wasn't doing what the Warren Commission said he is. So then you start to wonder about the whole thing. And it does fall down like a house of cards, which is, unexpected that there would be so much information just in this one case of investigating who was Victoria Adams and what was her story and what really happened.
What's really interesting about her story is that she was one of the more consistent witnesses in what she was describing. She had been interviewed numerous times by the FBI and Dallas Police and Secret Service, and consistently through all those interviews, she said the same thing, that she came down the stairs immediately after the shots, that she saw and heard no one, and that she didn't see anyone on the first floor when she arrived there. That was consistent, unlike a lot of other witnesses who, by the time they reached the Warren Commission's offices, had changed or altered their statements somewhat to conform with, either what the Warren report was saying or what the local issues were being discussed by the media. She was extremely consistent with that. And the Warren Commission was interested in her story. It's obvious from the documents in the National Archives that the behind-the-scenes look at the Warren Commission, they were very interested in her story. David Bellin, who ended up interviewing her for the Warren Commission, for example, wrote a rather lengthy memo to his boss, J. Lee Rankin, in February, in which he stated the importance of Vicky Adams and, in his words, the need to resolve the timing of when she came down the stairs. Other commission members and staff also voiced concern over her story. It's clear in the documents of the Warren Commission, which are not published, by the way, that she was very important. She was critical to their investigation. How did they handle that? Well, David Bellin, when he interviewed Vicky Adams, according to her, the first thing he said was that he didn't believe a word she was saying. And she was offended by that and said to David Bellin that he should interview Sandra Styles, the woman who went down the stairs with her, and she could conform or could corroborate the timing of their descent, what they saw or didn't see. He told her that they didn't need Sandra Styles, they had Vicky Adams. When she said, well, include me in your time test then, he refused to do that. And she was the only one excluded from the time tests that revolved around Oswald's escape from the 6th floor. The document that surfaced in 1999, when I found it in the archives, that showed she had been telling the truth, had been suppressed for 35 years. So there was obviously an attempt by the commission to not investigate her story more, as it should have done. And in fact, it apparently went out on a limb and decided to do things that would make her testimony appear to be inaccurate. So the importance that the Warren Commission attached to her story and the way it handled her story in the end, to me, indicates that they considered this a very dangerous area of the investigation, and they shied away from it.
Yeah, I mean, the accessories after the fact, you think, okay, the one crime is the murder, and then this cover-up is the second crime. Yeah. Also, your book is chock full of facts and research that is worthwhile. Like I said, anyone in the JFK research community who hasn't already read it should pick it up. Now, do you have a website right now? Is there a place where the book is available?
I do. The book is available through Amazon.com, and it's also available at most major and independent bookstores throughout the United States. Barnes & Noble has picked it up in all of its stores. It's available through the Pelican Publishing Company website. I have a web page that is a rather awkward site address. The easiest way to access it would be simply to Google my name, Barry Ernest, author of The Girl on the Stairs, and it will bring you to that website. There's updates on that website of questions that are asked by various readers. There's a tab there where you can check on where book signings and speaking events are going to be held, as well as any other updated research involving The Girl on the Stairs or any aspect of that.
Now, one thing I like to ask researchers or authors about their journey into a topic, and this topic, I know well, but we're always learning, those who are open to that. And the question would be, when you were kind of pro-Warren Commission, what was the catalyst? What was one item that kind of stuck out that said, well, this is a shocking revelation. If this is true, everything I thought about this case is an error. Do you recall what might have, if there was one or two items that made you get right into the case?
Well, you have to go back to 1967 when
Right.
I was a firm believer in this case, and a friend of mine, Terry, actually confronted me with some odd things that he was finding out, one of which was the Zapruder film and the backward motion to Kennedy's head, which, of course, if you read the Warren Report, is not mentioned at all in the Warren Commission report. And grassy knoll witnesses, witnesses who saw smoke, things like that aren't brought up in the Warren Report, that you don't know about unless you dig deeper. The big thing, when he first came to me with these issues, my goal at that point was to become more familiar with the evidence in the background in order to prove him wrong. I wanted to say to him, hey, you're making a mistake in thinking that it was a conspiracy, and here's the evidence that I looked deeper into the Warren Report and found. But what happened was I couldn't do that. The more I looked into the Warren Report, the more these questions arose. Why didn't they discuss this backward snap to Kennedy's head? Why did Dan Rather call the shot to the head in film frame 313 a minor explosion? Why did Walter Cronkite call the movement of Kennedy's head a minor or a slight backward motion? What was the problem with this? Why weren't they revealing this information that we should know about? And the biggest thing that I found was when you look at the 26 volumes of evidence that ostensibly is supposed to support the Warren Report, it does no such thing. The testimony that they cite in the Warren Report is different from what the testimony of the actual witnesses were in the 26 volumes. You have Vicky Adams coming down the stairs and the Warren Report describing that descent, but it doesn't tell you that Sandra Styles accompanied her down the stairs. It only says, it gives the impression that Vicky Adams came down the stairs and she came down alone. Therefore, there is no corroboration of the timing that she says that she came down. It's only when you read in the 26 volumes, volume 6, her testimony, when you find out that Sandra Styles, a woman, went with her down the stairs. Then the question is raised, well, why wasn't she called? Why didn't they question Sandra Styles about this descent? Why didn't they question Dorothy Garner and Elsie Dorman, who were also at the window with Vicky Adams? 3 other women who could have corroborated her story were ignored. And instead, the Warren Commission basically said that Vicky Adams was wrong. I'd like to say that that's the only example that I found in the Warren Commission investigation that I did. But unfortunately, it's not. Vicky Adams is one of many who are treated this way, and the evidence was ignored. When I went to the National Archives in 1968 with my friend Terry, who actually was the one who questioned my support of the Warren Report, we saw the Zapruder film. We watched it for 4 hours, forward and backwards, over and over and over again, and it was just shocking to me at that early stage to see this Zapruder film that everyone on the Warren Commission was kind of downgrading as being a film of the assassination, but certainly not as explicit in showing that backward head motion, which was not even described. I think that was the turning point for me. I was getting to the point at that stage where I was talking to witnesses in Dallas and seeing the other side of the coin. But the real significant impact to me was watching that film in the National Archives and seeing that horrible backward motion and explosion to Kennedy's head. And I think I talk about that in the book, in which I slammed my fist onto the table and immediately thought, this has got to be a shot from the front. How could Kennedy have been hit from a shooter behind him and have him react the way he did? That to me did not prove that there was a conspiracy or a second gunman. But events like that, documents that I uncovered, things like that, had their toll on that change of mind that I had. And certainly the Vicky Adams story was the icing on the cake in the sense that the realization came that they were trying to form a theory based on selected evidence.
Yeah, very selected evidence. That's what's so appalling about it, that as a researcher such as yourself goes into it, you find that, like in the Oliver Stone film, they say what's white is black and what's black is white. I mean, if they didn't outright lie, they just excluded the person. So, like you mentioned with Sandra Styles, well, we can't say Vicky's mistaken if there's a witness, so we'll just leave her out of it, and then we'll say she's mistaken. Okay, next, And from point to point to point, I think researchers have found this a common thread. I can't think of anything more, criminal, but there we go, and we have your background and all the other researchers that I think have discovered the same thing, that the further you look into it, the darker it looks.
Well, when you have Vicky Adams on the stand and you question her and she says she came down at this particular time, and you have the Warren Commission providing evidence that disputes that, it's very easy to dismiss her. If you have corroboration from other witnesses, from Sandra Styles, who went down the stairs with her, from Dorothy Garner, who followed them to the top of the stairs and watched them go down the stairs, and when you have the corroborating documents like the one I found in 1999, the Martha Jo Stroud document, which fully corroborates what Vicky Adams was saying, but none of that is discussed by the Warren Commission, then you become very suspicious of was their investigation into her particular story legitimate.
Right. Now, you just mentioned that document. Can you want to just discuss that a little bit?
Okay. The dilemma of Vicky Adams was that she claimed to have gone down the stairs within 30 to 40 seconds following the final shot. The Warren Commission knew that Oswald was on the 6th floor and had come down the stairs to the 2nd floor lunchroom within that time frame. They knew that there was an encounter between Oswald, a Dallas police officer by the name of Marion Baker, and the depository building manager, Roy Truly, in the 2nd floor lunchroom within 90 seconds after the event. So they knew that they had to get Oswald down those stairs to that lunchroom within that time frame. They had done time tests proving that was the time frame in which Oswald escaped from the 6th floor. Now you have Vicky Adams entering the picture, by saying that she also went down those stairs within 30 seconds after the shot and arrived on the first floor within 1 minute. The question was always, was she on the stairs at the same time? The Warren Commission basically dismissed it, saying that she had come down the stairs later than that. She obviously made a mistake, that she had come down the stairs after Oswald had already passed the fourth floor where Vicky Adams was working, and after the second floor lunchroom encounter had occurred and Officer Baker and Roy Truly had ascended the stairs to the roof and passed the fourth floor. So she came down basically after all of this had occurred. That was the Warren Commission's logic. In 1999, by pure luck, I was in the archives and was searching through documents that had been sent from the U.S. Attorney's Office to Washington regarding the testimony of certain witnesses. And there was a document that has been, a letter actually, that is referred to by a lot of people now as the Martha Jo Stroud document. Martha Jo Stroud was the assistant U.S. attorney, and she wrote a letter to J. Lee Rankin in June of '64 stating that she was forwarding Vicky Adams' testimony to the Warren Commission. This was shortly after Vicky had testified before the Warren Commission, or actually before David Bellin, the staff member in Dallas. So she was transmitting to the Warren Commission her testimony with the corrections that she had made to her testimony. And in that document, it stated that Dorothy Garner, who was the supervisor of Vicky Adams and who was at the window at the same time, made the comment that particular morning that Vicky Adams had gone down the stairs, after which Dorothy Garner saw the police officer, Marion Baker, and Roy Truly come up the stairs. So now this is in contradiction to what the Warren Report said. The Warren Report, if you'll recall, stated that Vicky Adams came down after the encounter had occurred, after Baker and Truly had gone to the roof, after Oswald had passed by the second floor. But now we have this statement, this out-of-the-blue statement from Dorothy Garner saying that she distinctly saw Vicky Adams go down the stairs before Officer Baker and Roy Truly emerged. So it was strong corroboration that Vicky Adams had told the truth up to that point. And what happened was, apparently that document was suppressed because I had been to the archives on numerous occasions, always searching for updates on the Vicky Adams story, and had never seen this document before. And suddenly it appears in 1999, apparently the result of the JFK Act in releasing documents. And if anyone was unfamiliar with the story of Vicky Adams, this would have been a very innocuous document. It wouldn't have meant anything. But that key line that she had seen the police officer come up after Vicky had gone down was a bombshell in my estimation, because it clearly showed that Vicky was telling the truth about when she had descended the stairs.
Right. Now, you mentioned Dorothy Garner. Do you want to just discuss her a little bit?
One of the advantages to writing a book is that it often gets a lot of tips from readers, people who know some things or claim to know some things, and I have to admit that a lot of them that I receive are crackpots, basically. When you look into it a little bit further, you find that what they are saying is not really true. But one tidbit that did come in from a reader directed me to Dorothy Garner, the woman who claims in this Martha Jo Stroud document that she saw the police officer and Roy Truly emerge onto the fourth floor landing after Vicky had already left. So apparently they had read about this Martha Jo Stroud document, and they wrote to me and said, if you're interested, I know where you can find Dorothy Garner. And so, again, with some skepticism, I responded that I would be interested in talking with her. They provided me a telephone number, and indeed, Dorothy Garner was at the other end. What I found with Dorothy Garner is that she was completely unaware of the controversy surrounding Vicky Adams. She had no idea why I had written a book about her employee, which to me was a good sign, because she hadn't been force-fed anything. She hadn't been swayed by anything. This was a very fresh interview with her. And she confirmed for me a number of different things which you do not find in the Warren Commission or its evidence. And one was that she was at the window with Vicky Adams and Sandra Styles, that she did see both of them leave very quickly after the shots were fired. And here's the key element. She followed both of them out the rear door of the office and across the fourth-floor landing as they entered the stairs going down. And then she stayed in that position for some reason. And two things as a result of that. She saw the policeman come up the stairs after Vicky had gone down the stairs. And the second thing is she was very adamant in saying that she did not see Oswald come down the stairs after Vicky and Sandra Styles had gone down the stairs. What does this mean? Well, if she saw Sandra and Vicky go down the stairs and then saw the policeman and Roy Truly come up, Oswald already had to be in the second-floor lunchroom if that encounter had occurred at that time. Obviously, if she saw Baker and Truly come up the stairs, the encounter had already occurred on the second floor, which meant that Oswald would have had to go down the stairs prior to Vicky and Sandra being on the stairs, which was, according to Vicky, within 30 to 40 seconds following the shot. She did not see Oswald come after the stairs, or come down the stairs after all of this had occurred. The second thing that was interesting about Dorothy Garner is that she said she told this to the Warren Commission. When I asked her about that, she said that someone had talked with her from the Warren Commission. She relayed that information to them. I asked her who it was. She couldn't remember the name. I asked her, "Are you sure it was someone from the Warren Commission?" She said it was. She said the person identified himself as being from the Warren Commission when that person talked to her, and that the interview or questioning of her by this person was very brief. But what I found was, what I actually could not find was any record of any interview by the Warren Commission with Dorothy Garner. No testimony, no documentation. She was interviewed one time by the FBI, and it was a very brief interview, and she did not go into any of the details during that interview of what she had seen. But now all of a sudden we have the corroboration of Sandra Styles, who I talked with about the timing of their descent down the stairs, the very strong corroboration of Dorothy Garner, who actually followed those girls out to the stairs, and the corroboration that she gave me that supports the Martha Jo Strout document of when Vicky Adams went down the stairs. I think it's very clear that the evidence supports Vicky Adams at this point as to when she went down the stairs. It still leaves the question of why didn't she see Lee Oswald or hear Lee Oswald on those stairs.
And, of course, because he was not up on the sixth floor shooting.
Well, that is often a question that's posed to me. Does this prove that Lee Oswald was not on the sixth floor at the time of the assassination? My response to that is Vicky Adams alone does not prove that. I think it's very, very critical evidence about the scenario that we've been presented with regarding Lee Oswald's movements on that day. I think it's a strong indication that he may not have been up on the sixth floor at that time. But does it by itself prove that he wasn't up there? I personally don't believe that alone is enough. I think it certainly, well, Sylvia Maurer, back in 1967, wrote in Accessories After the Fact that if Vicky Adams' testimony is accurate, and if she is telling the truth about when she came down the stairs, it basically destroys the Warren Commission's scenario of what Oswald did between 12:30 and 12:32. And I think the fact that Vicky Adams did tell the truth does just that. It doesn't, in my opinion, it doesn't necessarily mean he wasn't up there. It just means that what we are told that he did between that period is not accurate. Something is amiss. Whether he was up there or not lies in the balance, I guess.
Right, but then the contrary story from him is that, he was in the lunchroom. There were other witnesses said that they were getting change for him at the time. He was drinking a pop the time that Troy Truly confronted him. If he's already down there on the second floor and other people were on the stairs, so from my way of looking, it has to exclude. It just means that, of course, he wasn't up there because all these witnesses would have had to have seen him.
Mm-hmm.
And then that underscores the lie at the Warren Commission. Well, if they're lying about that, what else are they lying about Lee Oswald,
That's another interesting area. When I was in Dallas in 1968, I interviewed Roy Truly. Of course, he reiterated that Oswald was calm, cool, and collected when they saw them in the second floor, and his opinion was that it didn't appear that he had done what he was accused of doing later on. It didn't appear that he had shot the President of the United States at that point. When I asked Roy Truly if I could get to the sixth floor, of course, he said no one's allowed up there. But he did allow me to walk around the first floor on my own. And what I did was, when no one was looking, I snuck up to the second floor lunchroom and very closely examined that area. And what I found, and what has been reported in other books as well, is that there was a hallway that led from the front of the building, the stairs at the front of the building, down across parallel to the front of the building, and then turned to the right to go back to the lunchroom. If you read Officer Baker's testimony, he gives indications in his testimony that he first saw Oswald in the back of this hallway or vestibule that was outside the lunchroom, a spot where, according to Baker, Oswald was not supposed to be. My question was, why not? I mean, he worked there. It's very easy to get to that area for any worker. So what I found was that there was a viable alternative to how Oswald could have arrived in the second floor lunchroom rather than coming down the stairs, and that was simply to walk across the first floor of the depository, up the front stairs, the set of stairs that led to the second floor in the front of the building, just inside the front door, and down that hallway to go into the lunchroom. That would explain why he wasn't out of breath, why he was calm, cool, and collected, perhaps why Carolyn Arnold thought she saw Oswald just inside the front doors at the time or shortly before the assassination. So there is an alternative to Oswald being in the second floor lunchroom rather than just coming down the back stairs. It would also explain why no one saw or heard him on the back stairs. So there are very, very logical alternatives to him not being on the sixth floor at the time the shots were fired.
I guess that's the point I was getting at, that I think a lot of researchers and citizens of America get pissed off and mad that here is the best of their judicial system. A Warren Commission is supposed to look out for them, and it's stabbing him in the back by trying to put forward, well, here is, every way which Lee Oswald had to have done it, and as you investigate them, they're just not true, and you could go as far as to say some of these scenarios, they were impossible, like the Commission Exhibit 399. There's no way that one bullet did all that. That's why they call it the magic bullet. Even the gunshots from that crappy rifle, there's no way you can get those shots off. And then hiring somebody, I'm not sure if it was somebody, a track person, but anyway, I think Jim Garrison alluded that they got somebody that was, an athlete to run down these stairs and get to the pop machine and put the coins in and get the pop out all in the allotted time, and that just never worked.
Well, Oswald was on a very tight schedule from the last shot that was fired in Dealey Plaza to his capture in the Texas Theater. They mapped out his timing to the second, so it was very, very clear that his schedule was very tight. He didn't have any room for error in what he did. And
no, but that's what I'm saying. If you don't subscribe to that,
right,
then this mapping out in this to the second and all that, it just doesn't work.
No.
And then you go, I won't, try to put words in your mouth, but I'll say this whole thing is a charade. That this mapping of time and having people trying to run to create, having to get the shots off in 6.5 seconds, all these different items that I'm, researchers are well aware of, but anyone new to the cases, as you start looking into it, you go, well, he couldn't do it. He couldn't get from the rooming house to Tippett was shot at 1:06. I mean, this timetable, it just from A to B to C to D, none of them work. Yet the Warren Commission just said, we've looked into it and this all works, and here's how he did it. In the case of Victoria Adams and Sandra Styles and Dorothy Garner, now, and other people that, at least this is recent work that you have done, and people back in the 70s didn't know about this. I'm not sure how much people knew in the 1978 House Select Committee Assassinations Review, their investigation. But as people come forward to corroborate witnesses and with the work that you've done, they say, well, I was here and I didn't see anybody. And not only that, I have witnesses. And if there was someone there, we would have seen him, we would have had to. And, of course, in Oliver Stone's film, JFK, they make that kind of allusion that, Oswald would have had to be running by these women. They would have had to see him for the scenario to work.
Right. In order for the Warren Commission, in order for its theory of how Oswald got to the second floor, he would have had to been running by Vicky Adams and Sandra Styles, and that was what the movie JFK presented, the scenario. This had to be the way it occurred if the Warren Commission is correct. And obviously the Warren Commission disregarded Vicky Adams and therefore Sandra Styles and made it work to the scenario that they wanted.
Well, sorry, you mentioned the second floor landing there, because I recall in your book that there are other witnesses that corroborate what happened down near the front door then, that when Vicky Adams is down there, and people are noting the time, well, I saw her at this time and down there. Do you want to just discuss that aftermath?
Well, according to Vicky Adams, when she arrived on the first floor, and this, to back up a little bit, the Warren Commission used the statements of two employees to discredit Vicky Adams. First of all, it said that she was wrong because she didn't see Oswald or hear Oswald on the stairs. We know he came down the stairs at this time. If you didn't hear him, then you're the one who's wrong, not us. The second reason that it discredited her was in her testimony, she states that she saw two depository employees when she emerged on the first floor, William Shelley and Billy Lovelady. They testified that they had been outside the building when the shots were fired and had taken a trip to the railroad yards when they saw all these people running there, and didn't return until to the building until some 3, 4, 5 minutes after the assassination. The logic the Warren Commission used was, if Vicky Adams saw those two on the first floor, then she's wrong about her timing, that she came down much later. And it was a legitimate statement, and if you read the Warren report, that's how they discredit her. But what they didn't do was get Sandra Styles to discuss this. Sandra Styles told me quite emphatically that Bill Shelley and William Lovelady were not on the first floor when they arrived there. Marion Baker told me that when he was there, he didn't see Vicky Adams, but he saw no one else either, other than a black man standing there, which Sandra Styles also said that she saw when she arrived on the first floor. And Vicky Adams confirmed to me in her interviews that she saw this black man, and that is the person that she spoke to, not William Shelley and Billy Lovelady. So we have no one supporting the fact that Billy Lovelady and William Shelley were on the first floor. When she went outside the building and ran around the side of the building, she came back to the front of the depository and heard on a police radio that the initial reaction was that shots had been fired from possibly the fourth or fifth floor of the depository. And she said that scared her because she knew she was behind the only open window that was on the fourth floor at that point. They had raised it so that her coworker, Elsie Dorman, could film outside that window. So that scared her quite a bit. If you look at the transcript of the police transmissions on that date, the only reference that is made to an open fourth floor window occurs at 12:38 p.m. So based on the timing that she gave of coming down the stairs shortly after the shots and how long it took her to go around the building, which I tried to duplicate the best I could with a stopwatch, it puts her at that spot at 12:38 p.m. So there are other things that do support her actions on that day. She claims to have seen Avery Davis and Joe Molina outside the depository shortly before she went back in the building and actually spoke with them. Well, those two were never questioned as to whether they saw Vicky Adams. But if you do read their statements, both of them said they remained outside the building only momentarily after the shots before returning. So if Vicky Adams saw those two and heard the police radio, that puts her there in a very quick period of time, certainly shorter than what it would have taken had she emerged from the building 5 minutes after the assassination had occurred. So when you look into this further, there is just all kinds of evidence that support her statement that she is telling the truth. And that is what the Warren Commission did not want to hear. I think what's very interesting about this now is that those who support the Warren report dismissed her. Every time that I discussed with someone who was a Warren Commission supporter the story of Vicky Adams, she was mistaken. She was wrong. She obviously came down later. But now that the facts have come out and the documents have come out and the corroboration has emerged, they're now saying, okay, maybe she did tell the truth, but she came down so fast that she was now ahead of Lee Oswald and not behind him. So even those who support the Warren Commission these days are now making a 180-degree turn in an attempt to dismiss the importance of Vicky Adams.
Well, they have to, because they cling to this story like an ostrich sticking their head in the sand. I think that, as we've been mentioning, and I shouldn't keep going on it, but the further you look into it, you find out that the Warren Commission is a complete lie. I think almost that you can't trust anything the Warren Commission did, because I think early, as you mentioned, that evidence in the volumes is not supported by their conclusion, their report. So, even to make the report, they had to exclude stuff that they had already taken down as testimony. And the further fraud is that if the testimony didn't fit at all, he just didn't call that witness at all. They tried to hide that from the American public.
As I mentioned at the beginning of your program, the journey that I took with the girl on the stairs was twofold: to determine what actually occurred, to get answers to who shot my president, and to get the story, the truth behind the Vicky Adams story. What I arrived at after all those years was 4 conclusions on each of those 2 journeys. Regarding my attempts to find answers to the Warren Commission's theory, my first conclusion was that the Warren report is wrong. The second one was those who wrote the Warren report knew it was wrong when they wrote it. The third one was the assassination, in my opinion, is beyond the capabilities of one man. And the fourth conclusion was finding out who did kill JFK is beyond the capabilities of a private citizen. So those were the 4 conclusions I came to regarding the one aspect of my journey to find answers to who shot JFK. In particular, my conclusions regarding Victoria Adams were pretty much the same. 1, the Warren report is wrong about what it said concerning her. 2, those who wrote about her in the Warren report knew what they were saying was wrong before they wrote it, as they wrote it. This is the important one. 3, evidence now indicates that efforts have been made to intentionally make Miss Adams appear wrong. And 4th, the truth about Miss Adams now provides a critical element to Oswald's whereabouts at the time of the assassination. So those were my results after all the research that I did regarding not only my attempts to support the Warren Report, which failed, and my attempts to find out the story behind Vicky Adams, which, in my opinion, were successful.
Now, with this new release of the book, there were a couple of things that you've had time to add, and you mentioned earlier that with your first publication that people wrote into you and said they have a tip here, and one of them was Dorothy Garner.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything else you wanted to discuss that is a new area?
Well, Dorothy Garner, of course, is very important, another ignored witness in this whole Vicky Adams story. The second thing, which is very curious, as I mentioned initially in our interview, the reason that Vicky Adams was discredited was because she claimed to have seen William Shelley and Billy Lovelady on the first floor when she arrived there. This is nowhere in her earlier statements to any agency that interviewed her. She does not, even in detailed interviews with the FBI, which she gave immediately after the assassination, she does not mention seeing these two men. The way it occurred was in a very mysterious fashion in which Jim Lavelle was appearing on her doorstep one night asking her questions about what she had seen and heard. And she was afraid, basically, at that point, because she had already talked to the Dallas police. And here's a guy who shows up on her doorstep at 8 p.m. on a February night, claiming that he wants to interview her again because there had been a fire at the Dallas police headquarters and her file had been burned. And that, of course, obviously didn't occur. But that is the first instance in which Shelley and Lovelady come up as mentioned by Vicky Adams. And when I showed her that interview, which she had not seen before, she immediately said that Shelley Lovelady incident is not what she said to this police officer. It had been inserted in there, she felt. So the Shelley Lovelady incident is very, very critical. If she saw those two on the first floor and they are telling the truth in their testimony, then she came down later than she said because they had been outside the building for quite some time. She said that she never saw Shelley and Lovelady. Sandra Styles said that she never saw Shelley and Lovelady. Dorothy Garner said they went down the stairs immediately, which would preclude Shelley and Lovelady from being on the first floor at that time, unless Shelley and Lovelady are lying and they didn't go to the railroad yards. So this is a big issue, big question. When I first read Vicky Adams' original testimony in the National Archives in 1968, it states at the conclusion that she waived her right to examine her testimony. And David Bellin said, well, then we'll ship it to Washington without you seeing it. And there is no signature on that testimony, the original testimony. But when I saw the Martha Jo Stroud document, in addition to the other nuggets of evidence that were presented in that document, it makes mention to the fact that Vicky Adams was given a copy of her testimony. She examined it. She made 6 grammatical corrections to it, and she signed it. So this, again, was a conflict. It made me think, well, if she waived her signature on the document in 68, and now we have a document saying that she examined it and signed it, what's the story here? Which one is accurate? To make a long story short, what happened was when I consulted with the National Archives, I found that the 68 testimony that I had read had been declassified in 1967, her original testimony. The testimony that I now sought with these corrections was uncovered in the National Archives. It did, in fact, have her signature on it, and it did, in fact, show the corrections that had been made to that testimony that were indicated in the Martha Jo Stroud document. Both of the testimonies, the 68 and the current one, make mention of Shelley and Lovelady being on the first floor. Curious was the fact that this more recent version of her testimony the one that supposedly has their signature and corrections, it was declassified 2 months after The Girl on the Stairs was published, in which the Martha Jo Stroud letter was first announced or released. So here we have testimony that supports what she says in the 26 volumes. Now we have a version of the testimony that supports the Martha Jo Stroud document, both of which state that she saw Shelley and Lovelady on the first floor. I went back to the National Archives under Freedom of Information Act, requesting some kind of a solution to this. Why are there two versions? Why is one signed? Why is the other one not signed? Let me see the original stenographer's tape of the testimony of Victoria Adams. I don't want a transcript of it. I want to see the actual tape of her testimony. And I knew that the archives still maintained those tapes because I think it's in, I'm not sure what file it's in now, but there is a listing of the 552 witnesses and the stenographer's tapes of that testimony. They are not in alphabetical order or by name of the witness, but merely on the date that the testimony was taken. So they searched their data banks on the JFK case. They went to that section which has all of the tapes. And guess what? April 7th of 1964, all of the stenographer's tapes for that date are missing. That happens to be the date that Vicky Adams testified before David Mellon. Also, the date that William Shelley and Billy Lovelady testified before the Warren Commission, or at least before David Mellon in Dallas. So now all of a sudden the documents that would support whether or not she actually saw Shelley and Lovelady on the first floor, or whether or not maybe Lovelady and Shelley are accurate in their testimony of being on the first floor that quickly, those tapes are now missing.
Very interesting. So what are the ramifications that these tapes, someone read your book and they realize they've got to get rid of them quick?
Well, I mean, that's speculation as to what happened, but it's very clear that the Warren Commission went with the testimony of Vicky Adams that claims she did not see that testimony and examine it. She told me that on the one afternoon, someone from the U.S. Attorney's Office came to her office, gave her the testimony, and stood there while she went through it and made the grammatical corrections before she signed it and sent it back. So the evidence is there that she did examine it, she did approve it, she did sign off on it. When I mentioned to her, why does it say Shelley and Lovelady in there? You signed off on this. She said they weren't in there. They obviously, their names were not mentioned in her testimony. She was very positive about that. She reinforced it by saying, if those names had been in there, I would have edited that out because I did not see them on the first floor at that time. That is exactly what Sandra Styles said. I talked to her. I played devil's advocate with her in several situations discussing the Shelley Lovelady sighting. She was adamant that they were not there. She knew both of those men very well, and she said they were not there when the girls arrived on the first floor. Supposedly, according to the testimony of Vicky Adams, she made the statement to one of those men that the president had been shot. And Vicky told me that she did, in fact, remember making that statement, but it was not to Shelley or Lovelady. It was to a black man who was standing at the foot of the stairs. This is the same black man that Sandra Styles saw when she emerged on the first floor. She did not see Shelley and Lovelady, but she clearly remembered a black man standing by the elevators there. And off the cuff, Marion Baker said the same thing. I didn't even ask him about anyone who he saw on the first floor, but he told me that when he and Roy Truly ran across the first floor to the elevators, he saw a black man standing there, and he confronted him basically the way he confronted Oswald in the second-floor lunchroom. But it was Roy Truly who once again said to him, he's an employee here, and his words were, he's slightly retarded, which I don't know who that may have been. Some speculate that it was Eddie Piper. But all four of those people clearly remember seeing this black man standing there, but the only one who claims Shelley and Lovelady were there was the testimony of Vicky Adams, which she disputed. And the evidence, the corroborating evidence of Dorothy Garner and timing of the sin certainly disproved Shelley and Lovelady being there at that time. So obviously something is wrong with her testimony. She is very simple with it by saying that they inserted that in there in order to prove her wrong. And based on the other evidence, that seems to be supported. But whether or not it was, I don't know.
Well, what do you think the ramifications are that someone wants Lovelady and Shelley to be noticed or not noticed?
Well, the Shelley Lovelady sighting is crucial to the initial testimony of Vicky Adams. That is what the Warren Commission used to discredit her. It didn't go any further in asking for corroboration from Sandra Styles or Dorothy Garner. It didn't include her in the time tests. It merely said that she saw Shelley and Lovelady on the first floor. Now, William Shelley, if you read his testimony, he does not recall seeing Vicky Adams, even though he's the one that supposedly was spoken to by Vicky Adams. He did not recall seeing her on the first floor. He thought he saw her on the fourth floor sometime later that afternoon. Billy Lovelady, if you read his testimony, he is almost coached into saying that he saw a girl on the first floor who he thought was Vicky Adams. But he wouldn't swear to it. I mean, repeatedly he was asked, is it Vicky Adams that you saw? Well, I won't swear to it. So he's very weak in his testimony regarding that. And actually, in my initial reading of it, it sounded very much like he was being pushed into saying that he saw Vicky Adams on the first floor. So you can't really use their two statements as to whether Vicky was there or not. Certainly, if they're telling the truth and they went to the railroad yards after the final shot, which is what a lot of people did at that point, they could not have been in a position to see Vicky Adams come down the stairs if she is accurate with her timing and came down the stairs that quickly. So in my opinion, she is telling the truth. She did come down the stairs at the time that she said. Shelley and Lovelady were not there. They were either used to indicate that Vicky Adams came down later than she thought, and that's how they eliminated her as the crucial witness that she was. She simply did not see Oswald when the commission says he was on the stairs, and she saw two men who were outside the building for some 5 minutes, even though there's no evidence, absolutely no evidence, to clearly support that conclusion by the Warren Commission. Certainly Shelley and Lovelady don't support it, and the four people who were on the first floor did not see Shelley and Lovelady either. I can assure you that based on my interview with Marion Baker and the way he was very aggressive in confronting people, as he did with whoever this black man was on the first floor and Oswald on the second floor, that had he seen Shelley and Lovelady, he would have commented to me about it, or at least would have approached them or asked Roy Truly about them. And even Roy Truly did not see Shelley and Lovelady, which is very odd because Shelley was his co-manager and Lovelady was a warehouse worker who he hired, and he didn't even see them there. So I think it's obvious that they weren't there when they were supposed to be, and the mystery surrounding Vicky Adams' testimony and the fact that there isn't now the original stenographer's tape to prove whether she actually said it in front of a court reporter, the fact that that is missing lends even more suspicion to this whole thing.
Also, there's a kind of controversy, some researchers, a view of Altgen's 6 photo, which appears to show Billy Lovelady in the doorway, which other people think is actually Lee Oswald in the doorway, the front door of the 6th floor. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm talking about?
Yes, I do. Mm-hmm.
Right, so do you have any opinion at all as to at that time that would be Billy Lovelady or not?
Well...
And I'm just saying opinion,
Yeah, in my opinion, that is Billy Lovelady. Obviously, I can't be positive of that, but I believe that was Billy Lovelady on the stairs. There are other witnesses who said it was Billy Lovelady. It doesn't strike me as being possible. I mean, it's possible that it could have been Oswald, but in my opinion, the evidence does not seem to support that. I'm more inclined to believe that it was Billy Lovelady. Doesn't mean Oswald wasn't there, as Carolyn Arnold, if you believe her testimony, states. If you believe Lee Oswald that he was eating lunch on the 1st floor and went to the 2nd floor, it's quite possible that he was behind those glass doors leading to the 1st floor of the depository at the same time that Carolyn Arnold saw him there. So it's possible that Oswald was there. Whether he lingered there to watch the assassination or just passed by on his way to the 2nd floor, I don't know. But in my opinion, based on everything that I have looked at, it was not Lee Oswald on the front steps. I think that's just too simple of an answer to this.
Yeah, fair enough. And thanks for your opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this is an interesting book, interesting research. So congratulations on that. You've got a lot of good reviews on Amazon, and I think it's 4.5 out of 5 stars. And I looked at the one or two people that didn't agree with you, and they're crazy. So it's kind of humorous to read the people who only gave it 1 star, and you just shake your head like. Anyway, we'll leave it.
Well,
at
you
that.
got to remember that there are people out there whose purpose is to dispute anything that's written negative of the Warren Report. They may not have even read the Warren Report, or certainly have gone into the depth of research that a lot of legitimate researchers have done so. But they're doing what they do just to dispute anyone who disputes.
You mean people are paid to post under phony names to discredit good research?
Do you think that's possible, Len?
I know. You wouldn't until you get into the case, until you find some of the things, and then you see some of these Warren Commission supporters that, like the Flat Earth Society, regardless of where you sit on the whole outcome of the case, which you appear to be somewhat neutral in it. It doesn't really matter who killed Kennedy, but if I found out that it wasn't Lee Oswald, the investigation should go further. And these guys are saying, no, go back to sleep. Everyone knows that and like you mentioned, our president, I think the fact that President Kennedy was so important with his ideas is why he was removed. And these are the things that you think the Constitution stands for. Nowadays, when you hear of even with someone who was supposed to be as promising as Obama, just going, we're spying on you, but it's for your own good. And of course we're spying on you. And stop making a big deal of this. I'm only doing what I'm told to do. It's shocking how things have slid and are sliding fast down the slippery slope when you can't trust the Justice Department. You can't trust the FBI. You can't trust. I could talk for hours, so we'll leave it to this topic, though. But it's very problematic. And if you look back to the Kennedy assassination, you'll really be able to discover how things have gone sideways. When you thought that Lyndon Johnson surely would appoint an honest counsel, wasn't he a friend of JFK? When you find out, well, no, not really. They were enemies. And he was vice president, but he was only too happy to stab Kennedy in the back. And, of course, there's a lot of evidence that he would have been dropped from the ticket.
That's what I say about this whole subject. The beauty of this crime, if you can assign the word beauty to this crime, the beauty of it is that you can look for culpability anywhere and be reasonably assured of finding evidence to support that particular theory. That's why Lyndon Johnson did it, the anti-Castro Cubans did it, the pro-Castro Cubans do it, the CIA, the military, the FBI. I mean, you can look anywhere for culpability and find support for that particular theory. It doesn't mean it's right, but that's what makes this so confusing. And to me, being the average citizen who is unfamiliar with a lot of this can be very frustrating and very disturbing and very unnerving, and basically turn a lot of people away from really looking into this case a lot further. It's just so confusing and so much disinformation out there. It's become a real mess from when I started investigating in '67, which you were looked at as being somewhat of a legitimate researcher at that point. Now you're looked at as being a kook, and it's an unfair characterization for a lot of people. I don't doubt that there are a lot of kooks out there on both sides of the issue, but unfortunately, the legitimate researchers are pigeonholed as being that way.
Well, Bugliosi did that. He really bullied people, and he'd call people crazy if they didn't agree with him. Let me ask you this. Who are some of the good researchers that you have looked up to investigating?
Well, certainly my mentor all along has been Harold Weisberg. I met him very early in this game, and he coached me a lot in doing research. He never once gave me his thoughts or his opinions on who did it or why. He merely told me, put me in the direction of looking for documents and facts and the evidence in this case. He never, in fact, he cautioned me against giving my opinion or conjecture or speculation on this. And this is probably why you say that I'm a little neutral in this. It's not that I'm neutral. I firmly believe there was a whitewash by the commission, and I believe there was a conspiracy. But was Oswald a part of it? Was he on the sixth floor? I just don't know. And I'm not going to commit myself to an opinion like that, because one of the things Weisberg told me was, as soon as you make a speculative statement on this, you are going to be lambasted for that opinion. And so it's better to just stick with the evidence, stick with the facts and the documentation. And that's what I tried really hard to do in The Girl on the Stairs, was be very objective about what it was I was presenting and let the evidence speak for itself in the book. But Harold Weisberg was one that I really looked up to. Vincent Salandria was another one. I met Vince in Philadelphia on a number of occasions. A little-known researcher, his name is Gary Schwerner, Schoerner, I believe is his name. I mentioned him in my book. He was a close confidant to Harold Weisberg. He is the one that actually introduced me to Harold Weisberg. But I always I worked with him a lot in the early stages, and he was a Weisberg associate, so to speak. He believed in the same philosophy that Harold Weisberg did in working only toward documentation. I would make a number of statements that were confrontational and speculative, and he would always, again, caution me on that in the early stages of my research. He worked in Minneapolis. He was a PhD candidate at the time, but I admired him quite a bit. David Lifton, I did some early research work for Dave Lifton, and have still done research work for him. He actually was kind enough to write the foreword to the updated version of The Girl on the Stairs. Certainly Penn Jones, quite the character, Penn Jones, but had the passion for it that I admired, and he actually sort of was my mentor in getting into the field of journalism. That was his line of work, so I followed him around a lot of different days and developed a lot from him as well. There are a lot of researchers. I mean, every book that I've read has contributed to my knowledge of this case, no matter how bizarre it may be or how factual it may be. So, some of the early pioneer researchers are certainly the ones that I admire and look up to the most.
Yeah. No, yeah, there are quite a few. And you mentioned Sylvia Marr, Mark Lane, I like Jim Garrison, Mae Russell, Fletcher Prouty. But, I just think for those who were new to the case and might not know too much about you, if they wanted to know who were the people you liked, so fair enough.
Mm-hmm. Accessories After the Fact was one of the first books I read, and that still is a landmark book in my mind. Some of the more current ones, Sherry Feaster, for example, has written a very, very interesting book in which she now applies current-day forensic science to the crime, which I thought was very fascinating. I'm waiting for Vincent Palomare's book, Survivor's Guild. I can't wait to read that one. That should be a very interesting one. So a lot of good books coming down the line here, as you would expect them to on the 50th anniversary.
Okay, well, your book, The Girl on the Stairs, by Barry Ernest, and I heartily recommend it to anyone listening. And I'll make a link to your website, and people go there and check it out. I think you can read a little bit of the book there and anyway get an idea of it. But I hope this interview helped. I guess before we wrap up, then, is there anything else you'd like to bring up I didn't get to?
No, not offhand. The book, as I say, is updated with some new research, which I briefly talked about here. It's a different book than a lot of other books on the JFK case. One of my reviewers said that it's different because it tells the truth about the assassination and my research into it. So I think people would enjoy it. And I certainly thank those who have supported me. I've gotten a lot of good comments. You mentioned Amazon. I'm getting good reviews on that. And I'm glad to see that the people are reading it for more than what they think it is. A lot of people think it's only concerning Vicky Adams, but there are a lot of subtle stories behind the story of my search for Vicky Adams, and a lot of people are now seeing that in the book and appreciating that sort of side journey that I went on as well. So I
know I had that misconception as well. I thought when I first got the book, I thought, how is someone going to write about 40 seconds going down a stairway to the whole book? And I was so pleasantly surprised. So, it was about the journey, and you mentioned back in 1967 conversations with your friend who kind of urged you on to this. And this is, I think, the journey of research, and that people will enjoy that, how your point of view slowly, shifted, that the more you dug into it, and then your research to discover these witnesses.
Well, I have to give credit to Harold Weisberg. He's the one that actually pushed me into writing this book. He used to give me what he called assignments the whole time I knew him from 1968 on. He would call and say, hey, I have an assignment for you, or how about this assignment when you're in Dallas? And his final assignment, what turned out to be his final assignment to me, was to write about Vicky Adams. And he suggested that I do it differently. First of all, he said you can do it different by telling the truth, which was his little plug on a lot of the junk that was being written about the assassination. And the second thing he said was write it in the first person. Write it as a journey that you took to find this woman and to find the truth. And so I've got to give him a lot of credit for the way it turned out. And he read parts of it before he passed away and thought it was well written and conveyed the sense of correctness and accuracy that he would have approved of.
So, Barry, with the 50th anniversary and conferences coming up in the fall, what are your plans for November in Dallas?
Well, I will be doing a lot of book signings and public appearances that are being set up by my publisher at this point. Barnes & Noble, for instance, has indicated that they do want a lot of book signings right around that time. My main event in November will be participating in the JFK Lancer November in Dallas conference, which actually falls over the actual anniversary this year, Friday, November 22nd, being on a Friday in November of this year. So they have a 4-day conference going on in Dallas. I will be one of the speakers there, and I believe I'm set to participate in a panel discussion with Sherry Feaster and Deborah Conway at this event as well. A lot of book signings in the Dallas area during that time, and some other radio programs coming up. There is a good possibility of several documentaries coming out in late this year, early the part of next year, which are going to lead with and feature the story of Vicky Adams and the girl on the stairs. So it's very gratifying to finally see her truth being told by the media and at various events such as these. She once said to me, as we were concluding our interviews, that all she ever wanted out of this was for people to know that she had told the truth. And that was certainly the incentive that I needed to write the book, and it's very gratifying, even though she is no longer with us. It's gratifying to know that what she said and what she did on that day, the truth behind that is finally becoming known.
All right, that's something to look forward to, that people can see you in the Lancer Conference. November in Dallas, I believe, is the title. And
yes.
The other conference is COPA. I understand there may be even other conferences going on, but I think a lot of people will be in Dallas. Geez, do you think people are going to be allowed on the grassy knoll at all on November 22nd?
Well, I would hope so. The last I heard, it is going to be blocked off, invitation only, so to speak, to get on the grounds of Dealey Plaza. I'm not sure that it would be the safest place in the world to be on the 50th anniversary, what with a lot of the controversy surrounding it. But
are you saying fist fights might break out between researchers?
Well, define researchers. That's the thing.
Yeah.
Legitimate researchers, I'm sure, will be interested in it and will try to participate and get their views on it. Those who claim to be researchers, it's hard to tell. I mean, the way that the study of this case has gone, it's appalling, really, when you look at forums that are designed to ferret out the truth and do legitimate research, becoming nothing more than name-calling. And I don't participate in any of those forums because of that reason. I just don't see the point in getting on there and trying to dispute something with someone who either doesn't know the case or is going to be one-sided from the get-go. So I think you're going to have that kind of conflict as a possibility down there in Dallas. Unfortunately, I don't think people will be allowed on the grounds of Dealey Plaza as they usually are. I think there will be some kind of a screening process, I'm sure. Tickets
only, and you have to be accepted by Gary Mack, and I'm sure that the sixth floor is going to play their hand. If they don't like, if you have a pro book or a pro view on the assassination, then you're out. You know, if you think if you're a Warren Commission supporter, come on in.
Yeah, it's a shame that it has been reduced to that. I can see his point if they're trying to eliminate some of the hucksters that go in there and try to convince you to buy their tabloids. That is a legitimate concern, I would think, by
well, you know, but when you have Robert Groden harassed over 80
Right.
times, enough is enough. Thank goodness he's taken the city of Dallas, and I'm not sure if it's the state, but anyway, the city of Dallas to court, saying this is, against his constitutional rights to be in a public place, just to have a little table. And anyone who's seen, I mean, you mentioned hucksters. I don't think anybody would call Robert Groden a huckster. You know,
no, certainly not. I didn't mean to imply that he's a huckster. I'm talking about these guys that every time I go there confront you with a tabloid of the lore of the land that happens to be misrepresented. Their only objective is to make a buck on it. That is the type of huckster that I refer to. Robert Groden certainly is a well-established and renowned researcher, in my opinion, and what he's doing is trying to keep it alive. I talked to him one day in Dallas when I was there, and that was his line. He was trying to keep this subject alive by discussing it with people and selling his book. And so, I can see Gary Mack or anyone trying to eliminate the showmanship by hucksters who are there only to make a buck. But when you start eliminating legitimate researchers or those who have an opposing opinion who are not vocal necessarily or violence-prone in trying to get their opinion out there, That's, to me, a violation of the constitutional rights, as you mentioned, freedom of speech. Why can't they be allowed in there during that period? I don't know. It's a touchy issue.
Yeah, and I think the sixth floor issued a statement. We just wish that they could pick another day. This day is a celebration of Kennedy's life. No, it's the anniversary of his murder, and those who feel that Dallas was somehow culpable in it, well, I won't get into all the reasons for that, but just, if people go there, it's to pay tribute that President Kennedy, someone they admired, had been murdered there, and that there's their moment of silence as brought on by Penn Jones and also John Judge and the people who go there for the other 49 years for their moment of silence. And then after the moment of silence, you go to either one of the conferences that are on.
Right, exactly. Yep, I agree with that 100%, that it is not an issue of whether there was a conspiracy or not. It is to commemorate the fact that President Kennedy died on that spot 50 years ago. And that's the way it should be approached.
I think Jesse Ventura is the only government official to ever be there on an anniversary to say anything. When he was governor of Minnesota. You'd think that, other than this time with the Glee Choir, and they wanted the jets to fly over, and who knows what they're going to talk about. But, the mayor, it's almost an insult. I'll bet you if they didn't say anything, there would be a couple of thousand people there that would all meet there. They would meet all the researchers, and they say, okay, now it's off to our dinner, it's off to our conference, off to the hotel, and that would have been that. But now they want to fence it off, and I don't even think they have the right to. That's what I've been hearing, some legal opinions, that it's actually a national park.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, so we'll see what happens, but...
It'll be interesting.
Okay, well, we'll have to talk to you around that period again, and do let me know if anything's new. And otherwise, it's been a pleasure to speak to you. Good luck with the book and book signings and all other research you're doing.
All right, thank you. And thank you for all that you do in this aspect. I really appreciate your 50 Reasons for 50 Years and your constant weekly program, which I listen to, is just a tremendous help and certainly enlightening for a lot of people. And very well done.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
All righty. Thanks,
okay.
Len.
Bye-bye.